Well, you would have heard me repeating there are only 24 hours in a day. And that's a reminder to ourselves and to me that we do need to prioritize. And it's not always possible to do everything we want when we want, but we need to be able to assess, step back, and think what is important, what is relevant, what is time sensitive, and
Yeah.
then to go forward. And always remember that the longest journey begins with the first step. And or don't allow analysis to leave you paralyzed so much that you don't take any action.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to my show. My name is Tiffany, and this is Unveiling Journeys. I'm so excited to have you here today. I have an amazing guest for you. Can I just tell you 1 second about me? I love hanging out with people. I love meeting new people. I actually love going to networking events appropriately. Not like I don't want to do too many of them, right? But when I do, I get a chance to meet extra, like one-on-one with some of the guests. And I end up saying, "Oh my gosh, what you've just told me is so neat. Will you come on my show? Can I tell people about you? Or can I know more people just like you? Who would you want me to know? Or can I tell you a little bit about me?" And they're like, "Wow, there are people I want you to know." And so I'm just giving you permission right now that anybody that you meet, you're welcome to say, "Wow, can I know more people like you?" And it's really like asking a referral to be able to help small business, medium businesses, and make the world go round. That's actually why the podcast was born, because I could not contain all of the neat people that I meet so much. And I wanted to share their story in as many ways as possible. And so here's what I'm gonna do. I want to introduce to you my guest today. So cool. She has so many neat things that she's doing, and it's after my own heart. And so with that, welcome, Dr. Veronica. Tell everybody a little bit about you and what you're working on right now.
Tiffany, thank you very much for the warm introduction and the invitation to be part of your podcast. I'm Dr. Veronica Broomes, and I am founder of the Hidden Gems Podcasting Global. And that has come out of the Sheffield Hidden Gems Podcast. And I know you said there are lots of cool things that I do. I do have a couple of other hats that I wear. So my background has actually been in sustainability. I've come out of science. So I'm the founder of the Sustainability Support Service. And one of the highlights of that is an annual event that we hold. And hopefully I'll have a chance to share that with your listeners. And I manage a hospitality business, which is where the podcasting started many moons ago. So I'm
Right.
delighted to be here today and to share part of my journey with you and your viewers and listeners.
Yeah, I love what you're up to, because when we discussed the hidden gems part of it, and this is out of Sheffield, England, right?
It is. So
Okay.
Sheffield is a city in the north of England, which is in the UK. So across the pond, as they say.
Right, right. And I was like, I love this concept, hidden gems, but really what you've mastered is the art of creating something that is hidden gems anywhere. And this is fun because I live in a little town. I say little in California, it's a little town, right? And then I know so many people are in these little towns, and there really are hidden gems. And you have the ability to take someone where they're at and create this industry and this hidden gems around them, which I love, because that's the daunting part of starting a podcast. I muddled and mulled over it for years before someone said, "Tiff, get a camera, a microphone, and just hit record, post it here." And I was like, "Is that it? Are you sure?" Then you just dust off the ability to shake off your nerves to go and start it. But if you had guidance from someone that said, not only can I show you the ins and outs of it, but I've got a framework that you could step into, and we could just copy paste what it is that you've created into something somebody could walk into, which is now what you have available. So I'm a huge fan of what you've invented and being able to keep it going and being able to replicate that process for other people, which is why I was like, please come on my show. People say, "Tiff, how do you start a podcast?" I'm like, I know people that I can give you so that you don't have to listen to me.
Well said, Tiff, because I'm thinking that what you explained is part of the challenge for many people, especially if you're a sole founder, you're the
Mhm.
sole leader in your business. You may have others that you work with, but you don't need something else to add to your to do list because we all know there are only 24 hours in a day, despite wishing otherwise. And so, with the 24 hours, even with AI in the loop, you still need to be able to have some sense as to how can I take this action without it complicating what may already be a complex reality for
Yeah.
you. So you said having someone holding your hand, explaining what you do. That's exactly how I started. And I may have shared with you when we met at that, well, when we spoke after that meeting at that networking event online. This started during the pandemic. It was year one of the COVID-19 pandemic, and some of you may remember that. If you're in the hospitality business, or as we were at that time, it meant that we couldn't have guests coming to stay in the accommodation we were managing in Sheffield. So, in effect, what we still needed to do, because you had overhead expenses, you still needed to keep in touch with others. So, we were all in the same boat, figuratively speaking. And therefore, I meet these incredible people from Sheffield and the Sheffield City region, just the wider area, who were running businesses or managing not for profits or social enterprises. And I didn't really have a reason for keeping in touch with them after. They were lovely people. And I thought this was such a waste because these are people, many of whom I would not have come across otherwise. And I had no justification for keeping in touch with them. Because if you're running a business, you wouldn't necessarily go and look for people just to speak with them and say, oh, hello, how are you? Because it takes time to do that. And as I said, it's only 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
But it so happened, and coincidentally, there was someone who had just left a career in radio after at least 20 years, and he was just launching his marketing business using audio. And so podcasting was just sitting there as an opportunity. So it meant that I had some inclination as to what I could do and my reason for doing it. Because I mentioned hospitality sector, guests not visiting Sheffield, and I wanted to be able to add value to their experience when they were returning. So we were not just another accommodation provider. We were an accommodation provider that had the opportunity to open the window
Yeah.
into different parts of Sheffield so that visitors to Sheffield will learn about these hidden gems. They're not on the high street, but they're
Yeah.
people who are running independent businesses. They're people who are leading nonprofits or charities, as we say in the UK, and they're people who are running social enterprises. And so it came together and it led to the launch of the Sheffield's Hidden Gems podcast in early 2021. And as they say, the rest is history.
Right. Right. Now, tell me a little bit more about the sustainability work that you're doing right now,
All
too.
right. Okay. So sustainability I've been doing much longer than I've been podcasting, but you can sense that I'm enthusiastic about podcasting as well. Now, in terms of sustainability, when I started that, it was drawing on my experience of having worked in science and agricultural research as a plant biotechnologist. What that meant is that I was working in a lab, looking at small parts of a plant and seeking to multiply small parts into thousands of plants.
Hmm.
And to be able to have those plants, those little plants becoming larger plants that could then be used by food producers, because these plants traditionally are propagated vegetatively, so they're not from seeds. And
Huh.
the traditional way of propagating those would be having large parts of the plant that would be in the field, and then they're growing from there. But sometimes, if you have pests, especially diseases, not so much insect pests, for
Yeah.
example, but you have diseases, it means that if you have material that is not healthy, is not clean, it would affect the production.
Hmm.
And so this was not in the UK, it was actually overseas, internationally. And it was where I was responsible for setting up this national facility for plant tissue culture so that it was not only propagating or multiplying the plants so that clean material would go into the farmers' fields, but it was also saving the germplasm because the planting material, the varieties, the cultivars, because the material that would go into the field for seeds, it means that you can put it under cold conditions, but you can't do the
Yep.
same thing for parts of a plant. So
Yeah.
this is what this facility was about.
Oh,
And
that's neat.
so that led me over the years to, after I left doing working in a lab and being at the bench, it led me to use that science to work on environmental impact assessments. But at the same time, there was increasing recognition that science was not sitting in a vacuum, whether it was applied or theoretical, and there are people who are the heart of what is happening in science. And so there was a lot of work in different developmental type agencies as well as governmental agencies, looking at how you can ensure that not only are people protecting the environment, but the people who are part of the environment are not threatened in terms of their lives and livelihoods. And so that came together under sustainability, which is very much about looking at the planet, the
Ha.
people. So the planet is usually the environmental part, the people is the social part. And then if you run a business, there is an economic part which is described as the profit part.
Mhm.
Because it's pointless saying, oh, it's a nice to have. It can't be a nice to have only if you run a business. It needs to make business sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's saving you some money or helping you to innovate and find new opportunities. Like we have an online sustainability audit portal, which allows us to speed up the process of reviewing what people are doing in their business, in
Mhm.
their organization, as it relates to the multiple pillars of sustainability. But that didn't come in a vacuum. It was
Mm-mm.
part of the innovation because we recognized that we could speed up this process. We could find ways of not only simplifying, but provide additional information in our reports to clients. And so it was a way of innovating, creating an additional revenue stream in our business, but also ensuring that for the people, the organizations, for profit as well as non-profits, that they were not paying an arm and a leg in order to do what would work best for their
Mm.
organization. And it's very much about taking action that is practical for your organization and not going into overdrive to say, oh, we must do this, whether or not it's relevant, because that is costly, that is a waste of time and resources, and it would not allow your business to thrive.
Hmm. Wow, that's so much good information. I think about just the nature of how where I'm at in agriculture here in Central California, that even us, we have access to stuff that they didn't realize and they made sustainable just in plants alone, because we can buy something that's been grafted onto a tree that can be drought resistant here in California, but yet it will still make peaches or nectarines or whatever we grow here, almonds.
Indeed,
But,
indeed.
like, think about how much that has saved in water or diseases and being able to produce more food. People don't even think about how the scientists had to research this and make it happen, and then the best and the worst, and, like, I love this so much because this is really what helps us thrive in what it is that we're doing right now, and you can apply this to business. This is so fantastic. I wanna do this, though. I wanna tell the rest of your story because I don't wanna run out of time, but, let's
Okay,
start
let's
over.
go.
Like, where are you from? And, like, where, like, what did you go to school for? Like, what was it like all these, like, businesses that circle back around to getting you here from the start?
What a question, Tiff.
It's a loaded one.
It is because I'd say I certainly didn't see Veronica at 10 or 11 starting high school, secondary school, doing what Veronica is doing now. Not at all.
Yeah.
So I'm from Guyana, a country in South America. It's historically and culturally part of the Caribbean. I live in the UK now and have done so for more than 20 years. And so I'm British Guyanese, but Guyana is my country of origin. And I lived and worked there for many years. So as an adult, I was an adult working in the National Agricultural Research System as a senior biotechnologist and researcher for many years before leaving there to work as an independent consultant, doing a range of science linked projects, but increasingly impact assessments, both environmental and social. So I worked with teams to prepare environmental impact assessments with management plans, and as
Yeah.
well as project management assessment, project manage projects, sorry, not assessments, assessments in my mind. But it meant that one of the highlights of that freelance independent consultancy era was actually being responsible for the secretariat that organized a government of Guyana meeting that was linked with two of the ministries, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Agriculture, where you had people coming to the country to review the agricultural sector. And
Mm.
so for me, that had nothing to do with my science per se, but it allowed me to use my analytical skills as well as event organizing skills. And this was a question of doing that for government agencies and not the private sector. But it
Yeah.
was quite a learning experience for many reasons. Now, I went to school in Guyana as well, and at that time I started at high school or secondary school. Just maybe I was just a few months before 11, because there was this exam that you wrote that was like an entrance exam after primary school that, depending on the marks awarded or score that you got, would either give you an opportunity to go to a secondary school that was a senior secondary school, or to allow you to go to a school that was more local to where you
Mm.
live. Now, I was fortunate enough that we lived just about 10 miles outside the capital city, which is Georgetown. And had the opportunity to go to a senior secondary school, which meant that I started traveling every day. And at that time, there were trains in the country. And so it meant that I used to have an early morning train ride and afternoon train ride to go to secondary school. Now,
Wow.
our school system is arranged a bit different from the US, because I know you have junior high and senior high, and I haven't quite figured out what happens in junior, middle school, and senior. But in essence, it meant that it was 5 or 7 years in high school. I went for 5 years first and then 2 years, so 7 years overall. But after 3 years in secondary school, you have the option to choose which stream do you want to go into. And
Wow.
therefore, it means that you can choose whether you're still making up your mind in terms of it being general, or you're more creative and you wanted to go into the arts, or you thought that definitely science was what you were looking for. And so I opted for science. So I was in the science form for writing the initial exams after, and this at that time was actually an exam that was coming from the UK, because Guyana used to be a British colony, so it had strong alliances with the United Kingdom, and it is still a Commonwealth country. So my
Mhm.
secondary school, in essence, was more or less quite regular for that period, and I wouldn't date myself by telling you which decade it was. But
Yeah.
in essence, I went to secondary school, and after secondary school, it was the opportunity presented itself that I could have started going to university, because there is a university in Guyana. At that time, I would have been close enough to the campus, because the university campus, was between where I lived and the capital city. So it meant that it was even a shorter journey for me to get there. Not by train, because at that time it was either bus or public transport, buses or public transport that were taxi like, but shared taxis. And
Ah.
after secondary school and after university, I worked in Guyana for a few years, and then was fortunate enough to have a UNIDO fellowship, one of the UN agencies. I got this fellowship, and it just happened, serendipity played into that I was able to go to the University of Sheffield for a 3-year PhD program. So that's
Wow.
how I started in terms of further education as it relates to sciences. And when I returned to Guyana after my PhD, it meant I was responsible for setting up the first national facility for plant tissue culture.
Wow. That's
So
so
it
fun.
reminds me that, yes, I did have a life in science and not one in business.
Right, right. What did that blossom into next? Like, how long were you at that first career that you did after you graduated?
Overall, it would have been maybe 10 years or so, 10 to
Mhm.
12 years, because I was fortunate that my fellowship allowed me to keep in touch. So I was still an employee of another organization that through which a fellowship, another organization in Guyana, through which a fellowship was secured. And therefore, I knew that the reason I was being sent for training was so that I could acquire the skills necessary to help the country to start looking at how it could have improved its crop production, especially vegetatively propagated plants, as well as looking at introducing new technology and having people trained to use the technology and techniques to be able to improve the practical aspects of applying science
Hmm.
in what was then very much an agronomic society. So fast forward to impact assessment, and then I returned to the UK in the early noughties because I said that, well, yes, I've been there for over 20 years. And interestingly enough, I wasn't in Sheffield when I returned to the UK. I went to London. And I lived in London for a number of years, and I hadn't thought that I would have gone back to Sheffield. But life happens, and it meant that because I'd started looking at the hospitality sector, and that's quite circuitous, so we don't have time to go into how that happened. But it meant I was looking at the hospitality sector along with doing consultancies that were linked with sustainability and corporate social responsibility. But I started looking at the hospitality sector in terms of service accommodation. And London had huge challenges as I saw them. And so I thought, if I'm looking to go somewhere out of London, I started looking at cities that were closer to London because I built a network of people that I knew in London. And so I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know that I want to go return to Sheffield, but thankfully I did. And so it meant that when I started looking at all the other cities, I couldn't come up with enough of a reason for wanting to go there. And I thought, I know Sheffield. I've lived there for just over 3 years. I know it has teaching hospitals. I know it had a theatre, the Crucible Theatre, which still has snooker, the annual snooker championship. And I thought that this would have been the ideal place for me to start that hospitality business looking at service accommodation. And it was through that hospitality business that the Sheffield's Hidden Gems podcast was born, as I mentioned.
Ah,
And
yeah.
now I'm looking to take that to the world. Because just like
Yes.
how I could have started simply, as you explained, you don't need sophisticated studio. You simply need to have software, willingness to speak, a structure to what you're talking about, because it's not a bland conversation
Nope.
or a bland one. The
Yes.
conversation needs to attract the attention of the listeners, and it needs to be informative. And
Mm.
each guest is unique. So there's always a story to be told from each listener. It's not one person saying the same thing. So it wasn't a solo podcast. It was very much bringing one or two guests on board, letting them tell their story about their particular organization, themselves. What are some of the challenges they would have had? What is some of the successes that they'd like to share with us? And then also, what are some of the plans for the future? So, a simple Toastmasters may say there's a thread running through that conversation. And then at
Right.
the end, there's an opportunity for them to say how people can keep in touch with them. So, it was a simple format. It wasn't about the quantity of episodes that were recorded. In the first year, we averaged about two per month, but then that decreased in subsequent years. And it was only 5 years later or 4 years later, that we actually recorded our 50th episode. And that
Yeah.
was a special episode because whilst we've been doing, as we're recording this different places, but we're using the technology, it was the first time for the 50th episode that I was actually recording before a live audience in
Mm.
an open space with two different organizations in the same place. And
Wow.
that was because we were invited to join the annual Crosswires Festival, which is in effect a podcast festival where they bring renowned podcasters to the city of Sheffield. And over a weekend in early July, they'll have these different talks around at different places around the city. And we were one of the few local podcasters that were invited to be on stage to be able to record a podcast and share. And so
Mm.
it was also a PR opportunity for us because there were people there who had never heard of the Sheffield's Hidden Gems podcast. And it was an opportunity to let them know that it existed. We
Yeah.
had two remarkable CEOs from charities that were involved in mental health, as well as helping people who are preparing for work and maybe don't have all the resources to dress for success. So Suitworks was the second one. The other was a mental health charity. And it was an incredible experience because on the back of that, we'd have been able to have the recording shared with the BBC Upload, that's the British Broadcasting Corporation, they had a special program that you can upload information. And if someone, a journalist, finds it interesting, they can actually invite you to have an interview. And I
Ah,
was fortunate that I had one of the journalists who reached out and we had a pre recorded interview for her weekend, her Saturday show. So it started simply as just sharing
yeah.
information about these hidden gems in Sheffield. And it then led to that incredible achievement or that incredible opportunity to be able to share elsewhere. And so I know that for business founders who may struggle to start a podcast or to network or to think how can they be strategic in connecting with others, the Hidden Gems podcasting approach and format is super useful. So, yes, I'm plugging the business
Yeah.
and the opportunity, but I think it just helps to have help as to what you should do, how you could do it, how to invite those guests, and to keep it conversational and authentic.
Oh,
And
yeah,
you
because
can't beat
I
that.
mean, walking into structure is phenomenal. This is why we have franchises. This was why we have copy and paste. This is why we have books teaching all of this stuff, and people buy those for business coaches and whatnot. So you've created something that I love, and that's why I was like, I want to bring you on to tell people about
Thank
how
you,
this works.
Tiffany. Thank
Um,
you.
this is so much work that you put into all of this, but also all the stuff you continue to work on. It's a ton. Like, why do you keep going? Like, why is this so important to you?
It's important because I recognize that there are others who can benefit from my lived experiences as well as my learning. That's the first part of it. I enjoy what I do. The fact that I podcast allows me to bring attention to others as well as create content for my businesses. It also allows me to stay current
Hmm.
because it's easy if you've studied decades ago to get caught up in being historic, and I'm not a dinosaur. And therefore, you want to be able to stay current in terms of using technology and using it in a different way. If you think about classical approaches to broadcasting, radio stations, you needed a fair amount of tech to get going with
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
Now, anyone in any
Yeah.
part of the world that has access to the internet and a device, even a mobile phone,
Yeah.
can actually broadcast information and share that with the world. And
Right.
therefore, when we create this hidden gems network of podcasters globally, it will be an opportunity to leverage what people are doing in their individual cities with lots of others in other parts of the world.
Hmm.
And therefore, you're raising your profile, you're raising your brand, you're getting the opportunity to boost your communication, improve your marketing mix and the return on investment, but it's not costing you an arm and a leg.
Yeah. Let me do this. Let me ask because I only have three more questions left, so we can wrap up. Where do you want people to find you? Because it sounds like you have such a great system that people want to know where to come find you now.
And I'm happy to say where to find me. So if you look for Veronica Broomes, that's Veronica, M as in mother, E as in echo, S as in Saturday, PhD, you'll find me on LinkedIn. So
Oh, perfect.
Veronica Broomes on LinkedIn, that's an easy way to find me. But if you also search for Sheffield's Hidden Gems podcast, you will see the 50 plus episodes that are on the common podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, and Buzzsprout, and the RSS.com. So
Yeah.
it's in lots of places. Just
Oh,
simply
perfect.
Google Sheffield's Hidden Gems and Hidden Gems Podcasting Global. That's the other place you can go on the website and you can see on that landing page information that will tell you about the concept, how you can become a host for your particular city or town or area where you live. And if you'd like to attend one of the free evening sessions, they usually happen midweek, but all those details are in one place on that landing page for the Hidden Gems Podcasting Global Network.
Oh, I love it. All right. A second to last question. What's next? Like, what's on the horizon?
Conquering the world with podcasts,
Yeah.
a Hidden Gems podcaster in every city and town
Mm,
across the
that would be
world.
amazing. Yeah.
So, multiple countries, multiple locations, huge potential to grow that
Hmm.
and benefit travelers, benefit people in the tourism sector, as well as business owners. And it will be part of a legacy because your podcasts are not disappearing. They'll be there in another 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, so that you can also be helping people to understand what took place at the time that this was recorded because
Mm,
you're sharing that experience. And of
right.
course, with my sustainability hat, there's the annual online sustainability summit, and that's happening this year on the 22nd of October. It's
Okay.
usually in the latter part of October. So if you all, again, if you search Sustainability Support Service online summit, you'll find details for that. And it's on Luma at present.
Oh, perfect. I love that. All right. Last question. What do we leave everyone with? Like what are a couple of your really good nuggets of wisdom that we could end the show?
Well, you would have heard me repeating there are only 24 hours in a day. And that's a reminder to ourselves and to me that we do need to prioritize.
Mm,
And it's not always possible to do everything we want when we want, but we need to be able to assess, step back, and think what is important, what is relevant, what is time sensitive, and
yeah.
then to go forward. And always remember that the longest journey begins with the first step, and
Mm,
therefore don't allow analysis leave you paralyzed so much that you don't take any action.
hmm. Man, that's such good stuff. Thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing to hear
Thank
your story
you.
and to like let you crack into it. And I'm so excited. Everybody go follow. If you can't, go into the show notes and follow Dr. Veronica on LinkedIn and go to her website if you want to start a Hidden Gems podcast today. And then I'm gonna see you guys all on the next episode. Thank you everybody listening for your time. And you go have a wonderful day. Bye
Thank
everybody.
you, Tiffany, and thank you, listeners. Bye, everyone.